Hello, everyone, and welcome to the conversation with Mr. Gerald Chukwuma. Today, we'll be talking about his incredible show at DAArt Gallery titled Water Carried Us Here, Water Will Carry Us Away. Thank you for being here, Mr. Gerald. I really appreciate this time. So I want to just delve into this conversation, right? Yeah. And I want to give historical context because this incredible body of work is quite pivotal to Nigeria's history. But as we would find out, it's not something that has been spoken about very consistently, at least in our history, right? And so for anyone who is trying to know more about this body of work, I'm going to read something that gives context to it, and then we can pivot from there into your creative process, why this was important to you, and then kind of the relevance today. So I will begin. All right. In May of 1803, a shipload of captive West Africans, upon surviving the Middle Age, were landed by the US paid captors in Savannah by a slave ship to be auctioned off at one of the local slave markets. The ships enslaved passengers, including a number of Igbo people from what is now Nigeria. They were known to be planters and slavers of the American South, right? And they were known for being fiercely independent and resistant to chattel slavery. So the group of 75 enslaved Igbo people were bought by an agent called John Cooper and Thomas Spalding for forced labor on their plantation. So upon being transported, they realized that they were going to be enslaved. And I'm paraphrasing, but they essentially rebelled and took control of the ship and drowned their captors. And in the process of causing the grounding of the ship, this place was entitled or called Igbo Landing. The following sequence of the events is unclear, as there are several versions of the revolt, but apparently the Africans were ashore and went ashore, and subsequently under the direction of a high Igbo chief, they pretty much threw themselves into their demise, and they had this mass suicide. And before they did that, they were singing this song entitled "The Water Spirits Brought Us, the Water Spirits Will Take Us Home." And so this was during the transatlantic slave trade. And I think it's really interesting because it's something I personally haven't heard of. I actually had to do my research, and I know that in your story, you'll probably let us know that it's also something that you had to go and do deep research on. Yeah. But I want us to go back to the genesis of this entire body of work we see today. We don't typically see you do this people that know you, maybe when you were in university, probably know that you are someone that deals very well with painting. But for those who have seen you internationally, they only see the intricately crafted sculptures on wood, made with found objects, and it's quite detailed. But instead here, we're met with these fluid, colorful, dynamic compositions, just paint all over the gaff. I want you to take us back to the genesis of this series. What really drew you to exploring the Igbo Landing story? And when did it become apparent to you that it was something that a story that needed to be told?
Thank you. A lot of questions.
A lot, so many.
But, curiosity and, having not heard of the Igbo Landing before, and shockingly was told to me by someone who is not even from here, I asked myself, this is something I should have known. So I took it upon myself to go find out. I went to the universities, to the libraries, and I checked, and I couldn't find one material written about this event, this serious thing. I think they even said it was the first, freedom march ever to be recorded, and you can't find it anywhere. So I got curious. Of course, the internet had sketches of things here and there. And so I said, look, if I was going to do anything, I would have to document this. Yeah. It has to be a research material somehow. So it took this journey of, in 2015, I started to, go around, ask these questions. So this body of work actually came from when I went to the supposed place where these people were taken from Gerald Chukwuma. Yeah. And I started to look for materials of people who had an idea. It was our stories are passed on line by line, from word of mouth. So I found very elderly people who had an idea. Someone told them, grandfather, grandmother told them, and so they were telling me these stories. And so while listening to them, I noticed that they were all, of course, very wrinkled. But you see, I started to see wrinkles in another form. Wrinkles became beautiful. They became a source of material, like a research material. Experience was filled in these wrinkles. So it imprinted in my brain as an artist, and it remained there. And so this series technically came out of those wrinkles.
Yes.
So I asked myself, if we're able to decipher the wrinkles on faces, we could just very much love them instead of fight them, and they could be telling our history. Since we couldn't even find any materials to say Igbo Landing happened. And Igbo Landing is not about Igbo Landing. It can even be called African Landing, because it's for a group of people, represents a group of people who said, you know what, we're not going to do this, we're not going to be slaves, we'll walk into freedom, even if it means we're going to die. I think that's what life really is all about. When you take those massive, in business, in relationships, say, look, I'm going with everything.
Yeah.
And sometimes it means like literally to die. And I think that's what they did, and I thought it should be recorded. And of course, what best medium could I use but art? That's the way I tell my best stories. And this is yes, like you said, what people do not realize, know much about me, but I started from here. I've always been a painter, and I will always be a painter. So yeah, it's not strange.
Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. I mean, when you said that you took a trip to the southeastern part of Nigeria, you were asking for personal accounts.
Yeah.
I mean, it's evident that in Nigeria, we don't have these institutions that house stories about our past in relation to that of our Western counterparts, right? And it's oftentimes passed down, almost like Chinese whispers. Like somebody tells another person, and I know that story must have morphed.
Here and there.
I want you to give context, because I know each piece that we have here represents the individuals that you spoke of. Can you tell us a little bit about the individual works? And I know we'll talk about technique a bit, but when you had those conversations, what was the overarching message from each of them? Because I can imagine their stories were somewhat different, but they all had one story, solid story to it. Can you give context to that?
The titles tell. I have like the civil servant story, I have the damsel story, I have stories of different people. And the reason why I chose these titles is because each person I met, I had come to ask about Igbo Landing. But you see, they first told me their stories. So the damsel story, for instance, she told me, and I remember, very elderly woman, couldn't even move so much. But I remember her telling me, he said, look, young man, he said, when we came out in the market square, everyone shuts down when we dance. And I was trying to imagine this woman really dancing, which was like 95.
Wow.
But when she mentioned dance market square, she just glowed up a bit. And I knew that we need to capture these ideas. This is history. This is who really they are. So before they even told me what they had about Igbo Landing, they had told me a bit about themselves. And I thought I should capture that while I'm telling the story of Igbo Landing. So I should capture these people, who they are. The one who told me that he really wanted to work like a civil servant, sort of, in a context of civil servant. I want to work in the King's Palace, take messages, move around. So I titled the civil servant story, which is our 9 to 5. He didn't want to work in a farm, So he told me this story, and I could tell that he really wanted a kind of 9 to 5 job. So I titled it the civil servant story, which was so. I wanted to capture Igbo Landing, but also from the perspective of these people that told me, because they had their life, they had their history, and I wish we could decode these wrinkles. We will have stories that paper cannot take.
Wow. I mean, thank you. This idea of decoding somebody's history is a beautiful segue to talking about your history and your, I would call it upbringing or training. I know that you went to the University of Nsukka and you studied painting, and painting is your first love when it comes to your creative expression. And I will use that as well with your cultural heritage too, because in one of your interviews that you did, particularly the Alman's Foundation interview, you said in Igbo that Igbo is like tomorrow never finish, tomorrow's will continue.
I agree with you.
And I mean, I want you to say it in Igbo in a minute.
I will.
But it was speaking to the character of the Igbo man and the tenacity, the drive, the energy. I mean, when you started in university, how was that energy when you started painting, when you started creating? What was that energy like, and how does that link to this saying that they have from where you're from?
Igbo dike echi, echi adịghị agwụ agwụ. The Igbo is like tomorrow never finishes. It is my story. I went to the university 10 years after secondary school. Now, what was I doing for 10 years? I was living on hope. And that's the character of those guys on that ship, the Wanderer. That's their character. They didn't have to learn it. It was built in. So when they decided to walk in, they walked in without thinking.
Yeah.
That's the character. If we hear that if you go to any part of this world and don't find an Igbo man, you better pack your things and leave. Now, what this means really is that they can be enterprising anywhere. They don't really give up.
Yeah.
So my story, 10 straight years, I was trying one thing or the other. I didn't even do art in the secondary school because we didn't know what really art was going to lead us to. Parents didn't understand this, but it was already inside of me. And so I walked about for 10 years and came back to do this art. So that character for me is also something I really want to explore, because these things don't come from learning. They come from an inbuilt DNA. Yep. And if we don't really explore them, it will fizzle away. Yes. Wow. So, yeah.
I mean, in Nigeria, there's particular stereotypes attached to different tribes.
Yeah.
The Yorubas are quite ambitious, the Northerners are quite loyal, and Igbo people is more like they're resilient, they're able to thrive in any situation. Could you speak to the symbolism? Because I know that you are someone who dealt with wood carvings. You've traveled with it quite a lot. And anyone that looks to this, what do you want people to take from that energy when it comes to the resilience of being an Igbo person? What do you want them to take as they're looking at the work? I would like you to speak to
as
that.
Against the wood, right?
Yes.
Freedom is what I want people to see.
Okay. And
what is this freedom? Same kind of drawing from the Igbo Landing series. They wanted freedom and they went to... That's how I feel, really. I mean, we've done wood for many years. I understand that many people remember Gerald with wood. But you see, sometimes it's like being a slave also. If you cannot express any more from your heart, because you have to conform to who people want you to be, it's a certain kind of slavery. And so this is an outburst of freedom. Now, I don't want to say I don't give a hoot, but I really don't give a hoot. You know? But that's really how I feel. And I think that's how I felt when I started with wood. Okay. I want that feeling. That feeling is priceless. It's priceless. So, yeah, what do I want them to feel? This is still me. I mean, this is me. It's locked up in some part of my heart. I have to let it out. There could be more. Only if we try can we find out. Yeah.
So before we got into this conversation, you were speaking on the fact that this came before the wood carvings, this series. Yeah. And you have this multi-layered drip method. You have them in contoured lines, and I know that they represent the wrinkles. But I want you to speak to the emotional depth and like the rhythmic element of creating in that way. What is the process? Just walk us through, because anyone that hasn't seen the video of you holding the paint, I want you to visually paint us a visual picture of what that looks like.
Water is involved. I like current, because I also come from the eastern part of Nigeria where we're surrounded by water.
So and Uguta, yes.
So the largest lake in West Africa. So I lived and moved in water, and of course it has gotten into my fabrics, the fabrics of my makeup. So the movement of water is also it's fluid, it's current. The body of work is literally like that. Everything is moving like that, like current. And I think that movement for me takes me back to my roots. Somehow, that, boy born from in that place, he's been seeing this, lived in this. It started coming out in my work, and I think it's just natural. It wasn't really planned, but that's how it worked. And I'm happy I had to relive my childhood on art.
And even just the play of color.
The play,
because
the joy.
Were just you can even see it. I know that I think it's the school teacher that's behind me. Just the way the primary colors are just flowing in between each other. Was it just a natural, I'm going to put some red in there, I'm going to add some blue, it's going to be but how did it come from? I want you to paint that.
So I first print the work.
Okay.
So I first print. Now, why do I print? Because I believe that every person is got an underlay. And that's what I learned from these interviews. That's what I was all about to talk about. The wrinkles is they give me history about everything that happened in the village. And you can tell layers upon layers of their lives.
Yep.
So I thought I should lay layers first before I started to play around. And so the movement of the fluid, one upon another, sometimes they're not dry while I continue to put it.
Yeah.
That mixture, that agreement for me is how we are. It's one experience after another that shapes us up. So what we see face to face is actually a mixture of different experiences. And the truth is, we actually show what we want people to see. But there are layers. That's why the work is so layered. It's not such a serious thing, that I have to think about it. No. I'm just enjoying myself. If I had these works in the studio, they could just continue. They may not have even stopped. They may not have ended. They could just keep going because water doesn't really end. Yeah, it keeps flowing.
You spoke to freedom, and then you have this quote that says technique is therapy, right? And it's like, it's freedom, but it's method. You're also very intentional about where it's going, but you're playing around. I want to speak to the Index series. I know that it is quite different from what the Wrinkle series behind us is, which is kind of the passage of time and just bringing back the forgotten element of those that have gone before us. Can you speak to what the Index series means to you? Is these creative, abstract expressionist pieces that are made from, is it carbon? Sodium chloride, fabric ink, and acrylic. Can you tell us kind of how those came about? They're quite different from the Wrinkle series.
The technique is like a solution.
Okay.
And so the method, what I do is I lay the pictorial ground and then I pour water on it. And so when I pour water on it, the water moves as it wants to move. I love water. Water cannot be caged.
Yeah.
Any small space, water will move. So I let the water move. And then when the water moves, I drop the ink I want and acrylics I want just on it. And the beautiful thing begins to happen. The acrylics and the water mixes and they begin to, to move. And I allow it to dry. Of course, I put I like the way salt crystallizes. And it came by chance. I was working and then in school, that's why I said these things even came before the panels. I was trying these things in school, and of course, I had a small room. In that room was my bedroom, was my kitchen, was my everything. So while I was working, was my studio too. I was cooking, of course, and then they saw places, and I was so furious. And then the thing dries up, and I saw crystals. I said, my goodness, this is good. And so it laid in my spirit for that until. So when this thing has happened, I now peg the works on the wall. That is when I start to think, what can they become? So I now start to deliberately shape them into things that I think they have formed. For me, that's like a solution. Yes, we have been carried away. Yes, we have landed on those islands. Yes, we have been distorted here and there. What next? We can make something really good out of it. And that's also the Igbo life. That's the DNA. It doesn't matter. Just hem them at the wall, no problem. We find a small space and sell something, and we're erupting.
Yes.
It's inside. It's not, you don't learn it. Every child comes out with it. I think it's something we can really even teach in schools and find a method that we can apply. Who knows? It can help to change this part of the world for the better. So yeah, that's the series. That's what I do. I let the water decide what it wants, then I follow suit and bring out what I want. And so we work in an agreement, sort of.
Wow. Yeah, water is an integral part to this entire series.
Yeah.
It's like a current that flows through the fabric from the canvas all the way to the paper, all the way to just the form of everything that you've made. And of course, in the story of the Igbo Landing, what I'm hearing is water is kind of a point of, yes, it was meant for bondage, but it's also for emancipation, for freedom.
Yeah.
And I want to look at kind of how you look at this project evolving. As you see here, this is the first iteration of this series. I know there's so much more in your spirit.
Yeah, there's so much.
And there's more to come. I was watching an interview with Peter Edochie, and he was talking about paying homage to everyone, that the 75 individuals that passed away through a form of film. But how do you think, and I know we have this here, but the evolution of this series, what do you see coming from it? Where do you see it going in the future?
I'm glad you even mentioned Peter Edochie's, because someone came here on that day and said that. I said, you know what? I'm going to reach out to him. So we have started this story.
Wow.
We have started this documentation already. We have started it. I expect books to come out of this. I expect good books because I didn't find a book that wrote anything. One. And I went to at least 5 universities. I was even looking for a project topic so I can see what someone has researched. I didn't find it. So it's imperative that someone writes something. I mean, thank God for Oda. You guys better start thinking. We have to do a material at least. We have to, this interview, I'm sure we go places. We have to talk more about this. We need to take the exhibition all over where we can. But we have started. And like that spirit of the Igbo man, we ain't stopping until we get it done. It has to be done. Not for, the Igbo Landing is a small thing. It happened all over. It didn't just happen.
I know. It's probably the story that's
it happened all over. So no one's even telling us. So we need to start somewhere so we can call it back. And then, our generations unborn, someone said that the Holocaust was recorded history. Slavery was not recorded history. That's why we don't know what happened. That's why there's no reference. Well, it's not to know it to feel bad, it's to know it to know how to move. To know how to navigate, to understand it happened. Because it wasn't documented. And there's a reason, for me, is a necessary conspiracy not to document things like that. And we're not going to let it go by like that. And it's not just like we're doing art. We're doing strong art here. And we're going somewhere. Where? So I expect tests. And then, of course, they will get other series. We're going to expand it a bit more. Sculptures will come with it. And, we're just starting. It's going to be a lot larger than this. I can assure you that.
Come on now.
Yeah.
You said, you have a quote, you said we should also look at the possibilities of what history gave us and what better thing it can bring for us because it will continue to evolve.
Yeah.
And I like that you mentioned you're not hearing about slavery to feel bad.
No.
And it's not you can't just say that, because we talk about slavery, Black Africans always feel like, they don't know how to, navigate that thing, or we talk about it too much. It's not about talking about it too much. That happened for a majority of our existence, slavery in general. And we don't even know a quarter of it.
That's the reason. That's the reason we talk about it, because we don't know anything.
It's unfortunate. And I want you to say to the camera, if you can, what is your hope for, I want to say Africans, we're Nigerians really, because we're in Nigeria now, but what's your hope for us within this industry? How do you see there being hope for the visual arts, the creative industry, as it being a vehicle for hope here? How do you see that being something?
Visual art for me and for artists in Africa, is a big hope. You know why it is hope is because you can be abstract and not be afraid. It is something it's a vehicle you can use naturally. But I also think there should be high-level documentation. It is something I think we miss a bit here. We need to document well, good books, so that we don't just look at the visuals. We understand why it was made. But I think it's a big vehicle because, you see, like they say, a picture is like 1,000 words. You don't forget certain things because you saw them. But that's where we start from. That's where we begin to even question. So what is going to happen tomorrow? Because we saw something. So it's probably the only thing we have more than everyone in this world, creativity. I think we should harness it. I think we should use it to the end because Africa is overflowing with creativity. That's our language, actually. Yeah. So why are we not speaking it loud? I think this is hope for us. I think so. Yeah.
Funny enough, Obida is the one that said art is our greatest export. And it's the thing, at least in many creative industries or the creative landscapes of music, art, fashion, that has traveled for Africans the most to the West. And I think if we continue to harness it and our government eventually starts to take it seriously,
who knows?
We can find ways to just amplify that as our entry point, or in fact, maybe we don't even need an entry point. We can actually do it just here and people will come to us. Water carried us here, water will carry us away. It is both poetic and symbolic. And as a symbol, as water serves as a metaphor in your work, I want you to really just specifically talk about what it does to represent in terms of African history and identity. And I know you've spoken about it, but for someone that's from Imo State and your village is close to, I'd say it's Ugota Lake, but then the people 75 Igbo individuals that passed away were apparently from the Omabala people in Anambra. I want you to talk about like that connection and why the song was so important to them and to you, especially with the connection between you and between Imo State and Anambra.
Let me say something that we don't think about really. Okay. The water we are drinking today is the water they drank 75,000 years ago.
Come on.
The same water we are swimming in today is the same water that is flowing here now, is the one that was flowing when the pyramids were built. So tell me, what connects us more than water? No, think about it. So from my place, which is Uguta, to the DAArt, you see, the thing about water is that and that's why I use salt also. You know, the saltwater passage. I really love that connection. Came by chance, but nothing happens by chance. This is spiritual. So that water they pass through is the same water flowing in that Uguta today. That same water they carry them from with, and the other movement is still the one we are swimming at Bar Beach. It's so connected that when you fetch that water, so when they say we are talking about it too much, when you fetch that water to either go bathe or to refine to drink, some slave touched it. You like it or not, that's the truth. So why can't we just continue to hammer on it? What's wrong with that? We're not, like I said, saying it so that, we're saying so that we can move on. Yeah, so that we can find a perspective. It's like studying a football game, that you lost before you go to play the next one. It tells you where to block here and there. Yeah, it's so simple. Yeah. So the connection is too spiritual to begin to explain with words. Yeah, it's too spiritual. So I think the best way to explain this is with artwork. Yeah. That's why we need to continue to make artworks because that's how I can get deeper into the soul. Yeah.
I'm segueing, but you mentioned off camera that if today something were to happen and you had the inclination to walk away from art completely, that you would, and that's the freedom that moves you.
Yeah.
But it's not that art is confined to expression on canvas. It can be absolutely anything.
Yeah.
Can you speak to that? Just talk about the fact that you're not confined by just one point of expression.
I think I know that I was born to be an artist. I found out a bit late, but I know that I was born to be an artist. And so if I begin to manufacture cars tomorrow, you will know that an artist manufactured this car. It is certain. First, the colors will be wild. Then the interiors will glow. Of course, the engine, which is the thing, will be perfect, but you will know when it passes that car was made by an artist. And so art is what I've come to do here. But like I was telling you, if today I had that spiritual idea, just a spiritual message, leave the visual art, I will walk away, I won't think. For me, that's freedom. We're too confined to what people think about us, what people want us to become. And I've been privileged to listen to some interviews, and a guy was doing a social experiment. I was interviewing about 100 people who had turned 95 and above. Some at the dead bed, they're almost dying. And there was only one thing they kept saying: we wish we did what we wanted to do. So we just are here running around trying to do what everybody wants us to do. And then only to get to 90 and say, my goodness, I should have actually been dancing. So right here, right now, if I get that very little, I walk out here, I am done. I try something else, but it will be art.
And so where do you see yourself creatively moving towards after this series?
I'm going to go away for a year. I'm going to go and read about this Igbo Landing. I'm going to find everything about this Igbo Landing. I'll find anywhere it is. And I'm going to really do a body of work that will, by the grace of God, stay in a museum so that people can travel to see it and read the text. So when someone like me is looking for something about this, they know where to go to. The lady was telling me, maybe you can find it in Yale. I say, goodness. Yale. I can't find it in the University of Nigeria and Soka, but I can find it in Yale. I didn't have a visa. How do I go to Yale? My goodness. So we're going to do this work. So where do I see myself the next few years? I'm going to try to research this a bit. I'm going to try to make some works, and probably, like I've said, I'm going to hold people like Uda responsible to do some text so that we can write something. So people who don't understand visuals can read. So we can begin to keep our history and tell our stories ourselves. I think that's where I'm going to the next few years.
Do you see yourself outside of Oda collaborating with anyone who you feel could pay homage to this story? Abroad, in Nigeria, outside. This is just for you to document and to say it.
Completely open.
Okay.
That as open as, it doesn't matter who tells the story. What matters is what story is told. As long as we tell the right story, it doesn't matter.
You've heard it here first. Mr. Chukwuma is happy to collaborate with anybody. So if you're someone who would love to speak about Igbo Landing story, just give him a call. His number is 00. I'm joking. I would love for us to just quickly touch on one point that I didn't speak on, the Uli ancient making system. And I know that it's something that's very integral to your work. And I want you to speak on how it has influenced this body of work, because I know it's very clear in the wood carvings, but how did it appear in this series?
First, let me also make it clear that the Uli that I use is what I can term the pidgin Uli.
Okay.
It's a metamorphosis. How did I pick up Uli in the university? I was so intrigued. Are you saying we have a language that is called Uli that nobody knows? I have never heard of it before. So of course, as an artist, I was intrigued by the drawing, the motifs. That was what drew me first. Then I started to ask for the meanings, and would do research here and there. And so I told myself in the university that I will make sure that this language also comes out somehow. Okay. This language can't just disappear. Like the marking, like English, like Arabic, like all this didn't disappear. They continued because they used them. So I said, you know what? I'm going to try to just etch it in my work, put it in my painting, just to leave it on. But you see, as the days go by, they change because I'm not doing what I feel is mine. So it's kind of pidgin only.
Okay.
So it's a language now peculiar to me. But it is really all because you can notice it, you can feel it. So that's one of my resolve that I'm going to try to, because I'm a believer that if you want to take a culture away, you take their language away. And I think that's what happened to things like that too. I said, okay, I'm just going to be putting them small. And so when you interview me like you're asking about really, I'm glad. Do I even know what I'm doing? But you know that is really, that's okay for me.
Yes.
We're taking it on. Okay. Language is moving. So for these works, there's Uli. That's why I print. All the thing I printed under this work is Uli. So I do a wooden carving that I did Uli all through. Okay. Then I printed Uli before I started to put the colors on. Because even when we wear the suits on the streets of Broadway, is it what it's called? There's an Uli embedded inside of us, when taking it away. So we could have looked differently, we could have felt differently, we are talking differently, we are acting differently, but we have a root. So for this body of work, every base has an Uli print before I started to work. So some of them will simmer through the work. You can see the movement of the currents are taking them away. Like that water took some of our culture. Now, so now you hear things like African American. My goodness, it's Africa. Please now.
I know some people are very adamant about just being called African.
That's what it is now, living in America.
Yes.
Exactly.
Wow. Would you like to share anything with our audience about this series? Or any last thoughts that you want to share? Just
one thought. Freedom. Be free. It is better to be free than to be a slave. Believe me.
Right. Well, thank you. I appreciate this time. Thank you, DAArt, for the opportunity to speak with Mr. Gerald Chukwuma. And for all those who have not been to this show, it is imperative that you come to visit. It's an incredible body of work, and I think that it would influence you to doing more creatively or even just in your workplace. Thank you.